Okay, boys and girls, we're back at it again. Something I wanted to show you guys as we're working on this Ariens Deluxe 28, the SHO. I want to learn you a little something about spark plugs. Now, if we can see here, this plug here, are we focused? Can't tell if we're focused or not. No. Not in focus. That plug is a normal, maybe a touch rich, but you can see there's white still coming through the insulator plug. This is a brand new one. Definitely you can tell that's brand new. And this is the one that came out of that one. Now that's pretty carbon fouled. As you can see, it's pretty black. So, that being said, what I was going to say to you guys, sorry about the light, is that I see a lot of videos where the guys take these blackened plugs out and they try to start engines with them, and this one here is pretty black. Like, I mean, that's carboned up. And the thing is with carbon, some of you may or may not know that carbon conducts electricity. So just try and remember that trying to start motors on these blackened up plugs, you might be into trouble. And it might spark just fine. You know, you hang the plug against the engine block and you're testing it for spark, and it might spark just fine. But when it's under pressure, the electrons have a harder job jumping that little gap. And you can see the little gap there. Under vacuum, they jump the easiest. Under pressure, as the atmospheric pressure goes up, it's also harder for that spark to jump. I've got a spark machine in here that's probably a spark plug cleaning machine. It's got to be, well, I'll bet you it's all of 70 years old. It's got to be older than me, and I'm almost 60. So yeah, and I've tested plugs with this machine, and you can see when you increase the pressure, and it was designed to do that. There's a little barometric chamber in there, right? And you could pressurize it and see that the spark would go out. It's pretty cool. But not a lot of people realize that. So just remember, if you're working on a stubborn engine trying to get it going, or it's acting funny like misfiring a lot, change the spark plug if it's black like that. You're just running into trouble. So getting on to the oil change with this thing, I think there's two big problems remaining. I'm going to change the spark plug just because it's black. And this plug here, I don't know if you can see it. It's backwards because there's no reverse image on the camera. It's a torch. I don't like them. I think they're junk, but that's my opinion. And I'm going to put in there an NGK BPR6ES. That's the one that's going to get going in there. This one here is out of one of my racing engines that we used to race Honda motors, which, big shocker, most of these motors are copied off of Hondas. This was a Bosch. We ran these. They were a decent plug too. But you can get you can run Champions if you want. You can run Autolites. You can run just about any Nippon Denso, Bosch. There's a bunch out there. I prefer the NGK. That's what I use, and that's what we're going to be putting in. So the other thing is this thing won't idle. I got to figure out what's going on with it. I'm going to fill it back up with oil, and I'm going to see if we can play with that idle problem a little bit. There's a big debate going on whether or not to put anti-seize on spark plugs. Some guys say, well, it affects the torque, which is absolutely 100% right. But I don't torque my plugs. I do the snug and then a half or a quarter of a turn to compress the washer, the sealing washer here. And that's really not relevant of torque. That you'll feel it. You'll feel it compress and go nice and sealed. You know, There was never torque on the spark plug. When you buy them in a box, it was never torque. It was taper was plus a 1/16, gaskets was plus an 1/8 to a quarter, whatever. Till you could feel it snug up. There's this, and the big problem is it's not the spark plug that I worry about. It's the threads in the heads. That's where I like the anti-seize, because I have had problems in the past. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's the way I do it. So that's what that looks like there. There's just just on the threads, not tons, just a little bit. That's what I do. I'm not going to video me putting the spark plug in there, because these motors are just nasty to try to get the spark plug down in the hole and try to get it tightened up. The sockets all bind against the head gaskets. There's a 5/8 hex on the same size spark plug. The same everything, and I gotta find a number, because I don't understand why Honda's bad for this too. All the Hondas uses this BPR 60AS plug. You can't get the socket in there. The valve cover's in the way all the time. It's infuriating, but that's what they do. So I'm gonna put this in off camera, and then we'll get to the oil change. So yeah, that was a bit of a pain. I had to use a 21 mil normal socket and fish it out with a pair of needle nose pliers when I was done. That's the wrong bottle. Just a minute. The other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is when you're testing for spark on an engine, obviously you got a spark plug in there, or you're using one of those spark testers. The other thing is when you're doing a compression check on a motor, and you got something that has an electronic style ignition on it, make sure you either ground out the spark plug lead. You use one of those spark testers, like the one that has the set of points that jumps the gap, or you leave the spark plug in grounded to the motor. Kick it, or motorcycles, anything, right? Like, I watched Two Vintage. He's a great guy. Joe's a great guy, but what he did, he had gasoline all over the motor, and then when he left the spark plug in, it ignited the gasoline. And you guys might think, well, that's dangerous. Well, yeah, it is, but also repeatedly firing off the CDI without grounding it, or having somewhere for that energy to go, is detrimental. You got to understand, that's 40,000 volts, and it's going to go backwards. It's going to go backwards into the CDI unit. And even those mags on like these motors here, it's still an electronic device. There's no breaker points in here. It's not like the old days. And that high discharge of energy has to go somewhere. And it's detrimental to everything for it to go backwards back into the unit itself, because it's going to dissipate. It's going to find the path to ground no matter what. So I just, it befuddles me why people do some of the stuff that they do, and they get online and they claim this is terrible. They claim to be experts, but they don't know what they're doing. The oil is just, it's so cold in here, the oil is climbing down the pipe, so it's affecting my dipstick reading. But I know this motor takes 1 quart, and although it takes 1 quart, I don't know if you guys can see it, it is a touch below the full mark. There's a little note in the manual that says that the volumes that they recommend for the oil is nominal, and adjustments may be required up to 4 ounces. So 4 ounces is a fair bit. And I'll tell you what I normally do. You can argue me if you want. I know, and that's what the manual says, even though it says I adjust for the dipstick. My logic behind this is this is an oil cooled, and I said oil cooled, I didn't say air cooled. This is an oil cooled motor. And what happens is all that oil splashing around there is cooling all the other parts that don't have fins on them. And when the oil comes in contact with the parts with fins, that's when it gets cooled. So try to run it up on the stick. Whatever the stick says, as long as you're sure it's the right stick, run it up to the stick. It's a good habit to do. Because these motors, these motors do take a little bit more than what. That's right at the hole now. I'm happy with that. So you saw me put a little shot extra in there. That was a good measure. And well, we'll go to the next stage. I'm going to try to start working on this carburetor, figure out why it won't idle. But let me see if I can get this thing to run on its own, and then we'll go from there. See the other one in the background there. So another thing, spark plugs, is these engines in this cold weather take a long time to get to full running temperature. They might not even get full running temperature unless they're under a heavy load. There is a temperature for the spark plug, which when it reaches that said temperature, it's able to clean itself. It's able to remove deposits off the electrodes and the insulator. So if you run it and it runs cold all the time, well, that leads to foul plugs. You're not going to get 80,000 miles out of a spark plug in a small engine. There's all kinds of factors that are involved with that. So I think I'm just going to do a little bit of spraying for lube on top of the stuff, and that's about it. We'll round up the Ariens 28 Deluxe super high output, purchase number 2. Got it off the second one we got off Facebook Marketplace. This was an estate sale. I think we did okay on it. It's 2 years old, or 2 seasons old. This will be season number 3, and it was half the price of a brand new one. With Jumping Canada for my American friends, a brand new one's $3,000. That's depending if your dealer doesn't charge you PDI and all that other crap, or freight, or some other sneaky charge. Big box stores, I don't know if they charge an assembly charge, I don't know. But there you are. So it was half price. I went through the whole thing, found some problems, we fixed them. I got some spare parts on order. Drive wheel was okay. It was just as worn out as the other one. So the other one we might have changed it prematurely, but that's okay because we rely heavily with the amount of snow we get in the area and how often it snows. And cleaning up at the ends. The worst part of it is cleaning up at the end of your driveway. A lot of people try to push through it. That's a bad idea. You got to basically clutch your way through it. That's with your hand on the drive lever. Get Jake to demonstrate. Demonstrate the drive lever, clutching it, stop and start, stop and start, stop and start. And what you're doing there is you're allowing the auger and the throwing system to clean itself. So if you throw it in second gear and think you're going to ram the pile at the end of the driveway, that's where you hurt these machines. They're not bulldozers, they're snowblowers. And they have that auger system controls how much snow comes in and how much goes out. And if you overwhelm it, that's when they start slowing down. That's why That's why, and I know a lot of guys are going to disagree with me. There's a gap between the impeller and the housing right in there. And that gap allows for a certain amount of slippage. Just like when you're overloading it. So I hope you guys can appreciate the time it takes to make these videos. Yeah, so the important thing is to like the video. Please, please, please subscribe, because that helps the channel grow. And more people get to see it, more people get to learn. I try to produce stuff that teaches you something. Teaching you something to me is important. It's leaving a legacy. And you guys might think that's a little bit dramatic, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, our knowledge has to be passed on. And it's okay to read about it, but when you put your hands to it, let's see you do it. And that's what we need to teach. I teach Jake everything I can. I brought him up to work with his hands, to apply his knowledge that he learns with his hands to make things happen. So that being said, guys, thanks again. I know this was a long video, and you know, a 2-year-old machine, and look how much work we had to do on it. And that's not a knock at Ariens at all. These are damn good machines. That's why they're so expensive. But every machine needs to be taken care of. Every machine needs to be serviced. Pre-season operation service and post-season before you put it away service. And I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not good at the post-season. I always forget or get busy doing something else. But anyway, that's enough of that. There you go. Thanks again. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, check back often. And oh yeah, your tire pressure. I'm talking to you. Where are you? There you are. Make sure your tire pressure is equal and you're up around 18 pounds, let's say 20 pounds, so that the thing will drive easier and it'll steer easier. I'm reading in some of the comments on Facebook and some of the owners groups that the guys are having a hard time with the auto steer. And the one group has actually been removing any sort of negative comment, which I find terrible. They're removing negative comments about Ariens machines, and that's fine. There's no such thing as a perfect machine. So you got to follow the steps. You got to listen to what the engineer is saying. Don't add flaps inside the augers. Don't jack around. If it's engineer approved, then it's probably fine. But make sure, like I said, tire pressure is the important thing. You'd be surprised how you could have one tire at 18 pounds and the other one at 5. And that's going to make it steer funny. If it doesn't steer right, check your shear pins. You shear a pin on one side and that machine will act like it's shot in the leg. It won't function properly because the one side's not moving, is trying to push snow, the other side's augering snow and getting it out of the way. So anyway, I'm getting long-winded, trying to yell over top of the heater in the garage. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for subscribing, and that's it. That's all.